Today, we're going to take a close-up look at some of the newly released Craftsman tools to see if they're worth buying. You probably saw the news stories last year when Stanley Black Decker bought the Craftsman brand. Without getting into the details, Sears can continue selling Craftsman tools, but Stanley will be marketing the Craftsman tools sold at other retailers, and they recently added Craftsman at Lowe's. So I headed down to my local Lowe's to check them out. They have some tools at Lowe's that sure look to be the same Chinese Craftsman tools sold at Sears, but they also have some new and different tools made by Stanley. I picked up a 51-piece socket and ratchet set for $50 plus tax. This set is made in Taiwan. I'm kind of a country of origin nerd, so I like products made in places like the US, Japan, or Europe. But there are a lot of nice tools made in Taiwan. So first things first, let's take a look at the case. And it's a pretty nice case. We have real hinges here, and it looks like you could pull these hinge pins out and use each half of the case as basically a tray in your toolbox. In addition, we have real latches here on the front of the case. Another thing that's nice is the case is formed in a way that all the tools actually snap in place physically. I've seen Craftsman cases in the past where the tools just laid in there. So if you opened it wrong or if you bumped them, all the tools would fall out. Let's pop a few of these sockets out and take a closer look at them. For comparison, I grabbed some of the older USA-made Craftsman sockets that I have. And in addition to that, I went to a local Sears store and picked out one of the newer Chinese Craftsman sockets. Here we have the Stanley Craftsman, an older USA-made Craftsman, and the new Chinese Craftsman from Sears. Cosmetically, these new Stanley sockets look pretty good on the outside. The stampings and the design are a little bit different than the older sockets. For example, Sears has been using these easy read laser etched markings for a while, and the Stanley sockets do not have that. It's a little bit hard to tell in this shot, but the Stanley set has a darker chrome than the others. It's called gunmetal. It's just kind of a personal thing whether you like the different chrome better. I think I might, for cosmetic reasons, just like plain old chrome the best. One thing you may have already noticed about these new Stanley sockets is the deep ones are not that deep. This is an older 11mm USA-made Craftsman, and this is the new Chinese Craftsman, which is also 14mm. And you can see that's a significant difference there. Of course, there are pluses and minuses to how deep these are. The Stanley will be able to fit in some places that these other two can't, but on the other hand, these two deeper sockets will be able to reach some things the Stanley can't. One thing that's obvious looking at these is that they have off-corner engagement. What that means is that it takes the pressure off the very corner of the nut or bolt, which helps prevent rounding it off. That's good to see, and this is something that's been used on any decent brand of socket for years. And we can tell that it has off-corner engagement by kind of this rounded profile we see here in the corners. One thing that's not so great to see is that about a third of these sockets have some light surface rust on the inside. This is nothing major, it's really just a cosmetic thing. But they could have prevented this by adding an extra step in the manufacturing process and applying some sort of anti-rust coating to the inside of the sockets. As an example, here's the Chinese Craftsman socket. This dull gray finish on the inside is the anti-rust coating they applied at the factory. For several years, Craftsman sockets have used a double detent design. Some people complain about them for various reasons, saying they're hard to remove from some ratchets. I personally have not experienced that, but the new Stanley Craftsman tools use plain old traditional style detents, and all of them look well formed on my set. Now for the main event, the 120-tooth Craftsman ratchet. I've been using this a little bit, and it does have some nice features. For example, it has very little back drag, which I like. As far as the 120-tooth mechanism goes, that's kind of there for marketing. It's a very fine-tooth mechanism, but if you crunch the numbers, it's not a huge difference in real-world performance when you compare it to something like a 72 or an 80-tooth ratchet. Also, right out of the box, the mechanism in here did jam up on me a couple times. The drive just got stuck, wiggling it back and forth, was able to free it up. And it only did happen a couple times. It's been fine since then. What they did here is choose an off-the-shelf design that Stanley already used. This is a 120-tooth mechanism that you can find in, for example, some Stanley branded ratchets and possibly some others. There's nothing wrong with Stanley picking an off-the-shelf design for these Craftsman ratchets. They don't need to build a new mechanism just to use in these ratchets. It looks like what they did is they made a new handle to go with that mechanism. But there's one thing I don't like about this. They chose a mechanism that's not serviceable. As far as I can tell, there's no way to open this, which means you cannot open it up in the future to clean it and re-lubricate it. Stanley owns many different tool companies and makes a lot of different ratchets. I just wish they would have chosen a ratchet design that was serviceable for these new Craftsman ratchets. Since this is not serviceable, let's say a few years down the road it needed to be re-lubricated. You'd have to try to drip oil around the drive here and around the button to get some lubrication in there. Since we can't open this up, we can't take a look at the internals to see how it works. But I do know how it works because of a picture on the box and some information Stanley publishes about the 120-tooth Stanley branded ratchets. There is, of course, teeth on the gear, like with pretty much any ratchet design, and there are two pawls down here. And the way they get so many clicks out of this is as you're ratcheting it, those two pawls are alternating, and that's how you get 120 clicks per revolution. That's very similar to a design that Apex Tool Group uses on their 120-tooth gear wrench ratchets. There are some things I do like about this Craftsman ratchet. For one, it's finished very nicely. The chrome is very consistently polished. I don't really see any significant flaws, and all the stamping is cleanly and clearly done. The Craftsman ratchet is also decently long. For comparison, we have a classic 3/8" drive SK ratchet, and over here is a Tecton ratchet, and you can see the Craftsman is a little bit longer here. One more thing I wanted to mention. Some people think that fine-tooth ratchets are inherently weaker than coarse-tooth ratchets, and that's not exactly the case. It comes down 100% to how the ratchet is designed. On something like this, there are multiple teeth on the pawl engaging teeth on the gear. That's how you get good strength in a fine-tooth ratcheting mechanism. This new Stanley Craftsman ratchet is a little on the thick side, and I think that has to do with how the mechanism works. As we talked about before, there are two pawls in here, one stacked in front of the other, and that leads it to just being a little bit on the thicker side. It's clearly not the bulkiest ratchet. For example, take a look at the classic SK here, and you can see it's significantly larger. This new Craftsman ratchet is about the same thickness as this older USA-made Craftsman 3/8" drive ratchet. The thing is that a lot of modern ratchet designs have gotten slimmer. For example, this is the Tecton that I showed you earlier, and you can see that it's significantly thinner than the new Craftsman ratchet. I also put it through a quick torque test. My torque adapter only goes up to 150 foot-pounds. That should be no problem for any decent ratchet, and it was no problem for this ratchet. It did not skip and it performed fine. I wish I had a larger torque adapter to test the break-in strength of this ratchet, but that's a project for another day. Here's what Stanley says about the new Craftsman warranty. I'm glad to see they're not going to be requiring receipts. It says online that they could limit the number of returns, and it's not clear to me if there will be warranty replacements for tools in stores like Lowe's, so there are still some questions about how this will be handled. So after all of that, should you buy these new Craftsman tools? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag to me. I wish this ratchet was serviceable, but on the other hand, these are pretty well finished, and I do like that they're not going to be requiring a receipt for the warranty. However, I'm not sure there's a compelling reason to buy this over competitors like Gear Wrench or Tecton. Any of them would probably be a good choice if you're looking for good quality imported tools for a reasonable price. But I am still very interested in these new Craftsman tools from Stanley and what they release in the future. Stanley has said they're planning to release some USA-made Craftsman tools, and I hope they do, because I would be very interested in a new line of USA-made, moderately priced tools. So what do you think? Would you buy this new Craftsman tool set? Was it worth $50? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, hit that like button and that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.